Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and today is going to be a romance slash thriller type of reading vlog. I did not welcome you guys into this video before I just picked up the first book and started talking about it, so I'm jumping in here to say hello, hi, welcome. I have 4 books that I am going to be reading and chatting about throughout the video, so thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the video, and let's go ahead and get on to the first book. I will say that the first book I'm going to mention, I am almost finished with it. While I don't think it's necessarily considered like a romantic suspense or any type of like romance genre, I felt like the title fit very well for this type of video that I wanted to film, and it's also a little ironic since February I feel like is a month of love. Felt like this book could be a little ironic. The book I'm talking about is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. I am nearly finished with it. I've been listening to the audiobook, so this is not correct. So this book follows our 2 main characters. It's a dual POV, and our main character is Sarah Morgan, and she is a defense attorney, and her husband, who is Adam Morgan, is on trial for murdering his mistress. This book has been absolutely wild. I have read another book by this author. Whenever I read Geneva Rose, I feel like there has to be a smidge of suspense, of disbelief. I won't be spoiling anything. There's a few things in here that are a little far-fetched. The other book I read from this author, You Shouldn't Have Come Here, there were a few scenes in there that I felt like were very convenient, or, you know, you needed that suspension of disbelief because in reality I don't feel like those things would have really happened. And that kind of happens with a particular plot line in this book so far. It's not taking away my enjoyment of the story. Between 60 and 75%, I would say. Things were getting wild. Things were unhinged, crazy, completely mind-blowing. I should be finishing this book and I'll give you guys my final update at the end. And then when I give you my final update, my star rating and all of that, I will mention the next book in this video. So I have quite the update for you guys. I did end up finishing The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose, and I have also finished, since the last time we talked, Funny Story by Emily Henry. And I'm going to talk about both of these, but let me finish giving my wrap up of this book. It's been a few days, and I'll be totally honest, I can't even remember if I gave a description of this book in my first update of this vlog, which is going quite lovely. So this book follows our husband and wife, our 2 main characters, Sarah and Adam. Adam is a writer who has been somewhat struggling with some writing inspiration, and Sarah is a top defense attorney. They are celebrating their 10-year anniversary one weekend, but unfortunately Sarah never goes to their lake house to celebrate their marriage. And Adam is at the lake house alone, ends up inviting his mistress over, and of course they do some spicy things. The next morning, she is dead, the mistress. Our main character, he is arrested, and our other main character, the wife Sarah, ends up taking on his case. I finished this book. I'm giving it 4 stars. I really enjoy Geneva Rose's writing. I can tell that this author enjoys the books that she writes. Will I say it's a perfect book? No, I would definitely not say it's perfect. Overall, I enjoyed the twists and the turns that were in this book. I do think that if you think long and hard about who the killer could be, you can figure it out pretty easily. But what I enjoy about books like this is not so much the ending, but the journey, how we get there. That's what I enjoy about Geneva Rose's writing, and that's how I feel like with the other book I read from this author. I definitely think that there were some flaws in this. One thing that I did notice, I listened to the audiobook and read along with this, but in certain moments I noticed that the audiobook and my physical copy didn't line up. There were some things that I was listening to that did not happen in this copy, or or some of the wording was changed up. It was a little strange, and I know that sometimes that can happen, like if other editions of the book come out and the audiobook was recorded using a different book. Like, I understand all of that stuff, but it did distract me just a smidge, and I feel bad for feeling like that took away from my reading experience, which was why I gave it 4 stars instead of 4.5 or a 5-star. It didn't feel like a 5-star read, and that's not necessarily why I took off a star. I just feel like you feel a 5-star read when you read a book and you put it down and you're like, this was a 5-star read. Yes, this book had my jaw on the ground, especially towards the end there, and there were some really fun and wild and crazy twists and turns, and there were some certain scenes in here where it was just getting crazy. It was chaotic. Everyone was looking at each other, you screaming and yelling, accusing. I felt like I was watching a reality TV show at some points, and I did enjoy those parts. I didn't feel the 5-star feel. It's a 4-star. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I actually recommended this to one of my friends, and she is going to take a whack at it, so I'm going to give this to her. That is my update for The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. The next one I want to talk about is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I think in my last update, I wasn't quite sure what book I was going to be picking up for book 2 in this vlog. Well, here it is. It is finished, read cover to cover, and it's a 5-star read. I love this book so much. So this book follows our 2 main characters. We have Miles and Daphne. So Daphne was engaged to Peter, and they were about to get married, and on the night of his bachelor party, his old childhood friend Petra ended up confessing her love to Peter, and Peter ended up calling off the wedding with Daphne, and then he became engaged to Petra. And Miles is Petra's old boyfriend, with Daphne moving to Peter's hometown, not really knowing anybody, and kind of scrambling to find a place to stay. She ends up staying with Miles. Miles has an empty bedroom because Petra just moved out, so she moves right in. They end up bonding, and I love their chemistry together. I think that Emily Henry does a great job with crafting her characters, and not only in this book, I've read another book by this author too, and I love how real she makes these characters and the baggage that they also have. I love that while Daphne has her own trauma, has her own baggage, and we explore that, I love and appreciate that Miles also has some childhood trauma that he is working through, and you can see it in his character, and you can see how he is trying to push out of those boxes and that trauma and trying to cope with how his life was and how he wants his life to be. That is something I love and admire about Emily Henry. Even though it's a romance and there's definitely some spicy scenes in here, she doesn't shy away from making these characters feel real and making them feel like people you can connect to. And even the side characters, we had a really fun cast of side characters. What I also did love is, even though Peter and Petra are the exes, personally I didn't despise them. I didn't hate them. I feel like the author did a great job of making you not hate them because they're the exes. They were characters that were well-rounded and built up, and I felt like I could not necessarily understand them and understand their motives and the things that they did. It puts it into perspective where, like, if this could happen in real life, I guess that's the point I'm getting at, is it felt real enough where I'm sure somewhere out in the world a situation like this has happened. I think that it was a blast. I also listened to the audiobook as well as followed along with this physical copy, and I enjoyed the audiobook. I thought that it was really fun. I think that the narrator did an awesome job with it. I listened to it so fast. I am such a slow reader, and the fact that I finished this book in like 3.5 hours is wild to me. I absolutely loved this book. 5-star read, had a great time with it, would recommend it to anybody. It's fantastic. The last thing I want to say about this book before we move on and talk about what to expect for the rest of this vlog, I love the humor that Emily Henry puts into her books. She does so many funny little one-liners, funny little puns, and I just enjoy the humor. And maybe that was the whole point with this book being a little more lighthearted with the jokes and like the funny commentary and things like that. I just love listening to this book or reading along with a book, and then there's just some funny little one-liners in there that make you laugh. I got that a lot with this book, and I loved it. One thing that I'm not super crazy about, and I wanted to mention this, and then we'll move on. This book has a lot of pop culture references, and while I'm not somebody that particularly cares for those types of references in books, because I feel like sometimes it dates the books, if I don't read it now, I might not get those jokes later. I just wanted to mention that there were some things in here that were pop culture-y, and I'm just like, okay, yeah. And I mean, it didn't take away from my reading experience, clearly, because it's a 5-star read, but I wanted to just mention that. Now for the update for what you can expect for the rest of this vlog. I already started reading another book. I am like completely unhinged right now. I'm reading so much and it's wild and I'm having a blast. But on my Kindle, currently I am reading The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I wanted this to be the thriller book that I was reading for this video. I read the synopsis of this book quite some time ago while I started this book, and I'm only about 3 chapters in. So far, I'm loving it. It is wild. I'm enjoying it so far. We have our 2 main characters and I cannot remember their names. There's Tom and Sydney. Sydney, she is looking for the perfect boyfriend. She is trying to find the perfect match, the perfect partner. Tom is looking for his next perfect victim. And so far with this book, it's so good. I am about 3 chapters into this book and I am already enjoying the format. So it flip-flops back and forth between Tom and Sydney. It starts out with Tom, but before. And so far in the story, all of Tom's chapters, I think there's only been the prologue and then chapter 2, I think. All of his chapters have been in the before time. So when he's been younger, and then Sydney's chapters are present day. I already really like that format. I am really interested in everything that's been happening so far. I know I'm gonna enjoy this book because I enjoy Frida McFadden's storytelling, her writing style, and her twists and turns and her craft. I am so excited to continue reading with this book. So this is the next one that you guys can expect from me in this video. And then the other book, sorry, I hit my cat's bird toy. I'm sure you can hear it. Oh, he came running in here. Give me 3 minutes, okay? And then you can play with it. Oh, no, 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 no. I have one other book that I want to get to in this video, and I really hope that I can get to it. I will talk to you guys when I am probably about halfway through The Boyfriend to give you my middle of the road thoughts of the story, and then I'll come back and give you the update and then introduce the 4th and final book of this video. I have never been more disappointed in my entire life. I read and finished The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I know for the first few updates of this video, I've been mispronouncing that author's name, but it's McFadden. I am extremely disappointed in my reading experience. I'm giving The Boyfriend 2.5 stars. The other book I read from this author is The Teacher, and I loved it. I gave that book 5 stars. I ate it up. I couldn't get enough of it. I loved the twists. I loved the turns. I enjoyed the characters, the plot, just all of it. This book felt incredibly similar. Some of the like plot points, some of those key turning points in the story felt very similar to The Teacher and not executed in the best way. I originally wanted to give this book a 2-star. However, there were a few twists and turns at the end there that I enjoyed, and I gave it a 0.5 star more for it to be the 2.5. I didn't struggle with it enough to have wanted to DNF this book. The only thing that kept me going with this book was wanting to know if my theories were correct. I was half correct, and those are spoilers, so I won't be sharing what any of my thoughts and feelings were with what I was expecting those twists and turns to be. It wasn't what I was expecting, and it didn't hit the mark for me. I have a lot of opinions, and overall I'm just really disappointed in this story. I didn't even update you guys halfway through like I said I was going to in my last update because there was nothing for me to say. I know the first update I gave about this book, I was about 3 chapters in, maybe 4 chapters in, and that short amount of time, I really liked the beginning of this book. It felt very strong. I really enjoyed the back and forth with the 2 timelines. I liked our 2 main characters. We were getting past Tom when Tom was in high school, and then we were getting another perspective from a woman named Sydney. I enjoyed that up until maybe about 20%. And I would say from 20% to about 50%, to me, the story felt sluggish. There was nothing that was happening. The development of the characters that should have been happening in that time was non-existent. I felt like these characters were just cutouts of people, and there was no depth to them. Our main character, Sydney, I really did not like her chapters. I didn't enjoy her perspective. She was very odd with her descriptions of her friends when she was talking about them, and I really didn't appreciate how Sydney viewed her friends. A lot of the dialogue between that 20 and 50% mark felt so odd. It didn't feel natural. It felt like a draft of a story, you know, like when you write a first draft or a second draft, or you're just writing down your thoughts. And I felt like I was reading unpolished work. It needed a little bit of TLC in those areas, and it didn't get it. Now, I'm not like an expert. I am not the all-knowing goddess or anything. That dialogue really took me out of the story. And this next point I'm going to say, I guess it kind of makes sense the more we get into the story, but a lot of these characters, they were friends or acquaintances in some way, shape, or form. I didn't feel the friendship between these characters. Sydney had two best friends. She had Gretchen and Bonnie, but the way she would describe them in her internal monologue were descriptions that I just couldn't imagine thinking about any of my friends. They also felt very juvenile and very high school-ish. In Sydney's perspective, she was a 34-year-old woman, and to me it felt strange that a 34-year-old woman would have these certain thoughts about her friends, or to have such a negative, harsh, ungrateful outlook on life. And what I mean by that is there were a few examples in here. Our main character, she was trying to find the perfect guy, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect partner, right? I felt that whenever she would scroll on social media, or when her mom would call her, those were the only conversations that they had, and those were the only thoughts that were going through Sydney's mind. I didn't like that. It felt like lazy writing. I didn't appreciate how the author was writing those scenes. I didn't like when Sydney was scrolling on Facebook and she was seeing people who were married and they were having babies and they were posting all of those pictures on social media, and I didn't like how she was portrayed. You know, I can understand maybe feeling a little left out, or, you know, being a little jealous of seeing people being married and having kids, and if that's something that you want in life. But I didn't like how the author went about having those conversations. I think that those conversations could have been done a little stronger. I felt like she was a Grinch and was a nasty person. Whenever we had those conversations and things like that came up, it bothered me. And I also just didn't appreciate in those certain scenes and those certain circumstances that it was like putting other women down. I did not like that, and I really hated any time Sydney's mom called, because those were like the first words out of her mouth was like, guess how old this person was when she had babies? She was in her 40s. And those were things that really bothered me. And I think that it was a missed opportunity for the author to make them more constructive and to maybe not make Sydney sound like such a negative Nancy or so much of a Grinch in those types of situations. I hope I'm able to explain that the best that I can. I will say this goes back to what I said earlier about like the twists and the turns and the wows and the big reveals. None of that hit me like how I was hit with the teacher, with those twists and those turns and those characters. This story, it felt so incredibly flat for me. Anytime we had one of those wow moments that was supposed to knock your socks off, I did not feel that way. I was powering through this book to get to the end to see if my predictions were right. I'm definitely not going to spoil anything for anybody, but there was this one scene where these characters were going to a funeral. There were 3 of them and they were riding in the car. One of the characters looks over to one of the other ones and said, "Did you bring tissues?" And the other character replied and said that they did. And then the third character goes, "Why did you bring tissues? Is there gonna be food?" What the hell kind of conversation is that? What do you mean? And so that third character that made that comment seemed incredibly baffled that they would be crying over somebody who died but wasn't a family member. That whole conversation to me was really weird. Now, I don't know if the author was trying to go for something else, like maybe trying to build suspense or wondering why that character lacked emotion. That fell flat for me because I think a lot of people are affected by death, even if you're not related to the person that passes on. That whole scene right there, I hated that scene. That scene made no sense to me. I was annoyed and frustrated with that scene and with the characters in that scene. It was just awful. So I'm not going to be talking about the twist at the end that made me give it that 0.5 star, but that twist at the end is why I like Frida McFadden. And that is what I loved about The Teacher. When you had that final twist at the end, I did enjoy that, and I am happy that I was able to get to that point, but by golly, did this book hurt. And I'm really upset that I had this experience with it. It's going to make me a little more cautious of picking up a Frida McFadden book, and I'm a little disappointed in that. Considering there are a few other books of hers that I would like to read, this one did not hit the mark for me, and I'm really disappointed in that. And finally, I will say that I do enjoy a book that has multiple timelines, especially like a dual timeline, like a past and present. Those are some of my favorite types of books to read. I enjoyed all of Tom's chapters, all of the before chapters, way more than I enjoyed all of Sydney's chapters. I enjoyed all of those characters. I enjoyed them together. That felt a lot more fleshed out. That felt a lot more organic compared to the other timeline, the present timeline with Sydney and her friends and what was going on there. I am sad I didn't enjoy it because I was really looking forward to it. It might be one of my most disappointing books of the year. I am gonna go ahead and talk about the fourth and final book of this vlog, but I am going to be reading The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I am already a little more than 120-ish pages into this book. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's really sweet. It's really cute. This book follows our main character. Her name is Clementine, and she is living in her aunt's apartment. Her aunt has passed away, but her aunt has always told her that there was some type of magical time loop or time skipping element that was going on in her aunt's apartment. Clementine is now experiencing that. We have already met the love interest, the person that is in her apartment 7 years before. So Clementine is in the apartment in present day, and she wakes up one day and there's a man in her apartment. And that whole meet cute, that whole interaction between those two characters was so cute, so chaotic, and so fun. I loved it so much. I am maybe about 35% of the way through with this book. I'm enjoying it so far. I really do like the writing. I am already getting to some of those scenes where I'm like, oh no, or like cringing, but like a good cringe, and then getting a little sad and a little heartbroken. So I'm very much enjoying this book right now. I'm having a lot of fun with the characters. I do love our two side characters, Fiona and Drew. They are a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying everything about this book so far. So the next update I give you guys, I will be finished with this book. I'll give you my star rating, and we're gonna close out the vlog. I finished it. I finished The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. It is a 5-star read. I loved this book. I had so much fun. It was a range of emotions. I was happy, I was sad, I cried, I laughed. I felt like this story was so real. I loved the characters, and I know I said that in the first update talking about this book. I loved the characters, and I continued to love them. I loved the apartment, even though we never really understand and get a grasp of how this time loop happens. Even though that might not be explained fully 100%, I can overlook that because I don't think that was the whole point of the story. I think that it was incredibly beautiful and sad, and a lot of the heavy topics that were explored in here, especially surrounding the aunt and her death, I think that it was executed very well. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not any type of behavioral specialist by any means, but I think how that conversation was had, while it caught me off guard and that was not what I was expecting to get out of this story, it honestly was a lot more than what I was expecting. And I think that the author handled these topics with care and sensitivity and did such a beautiful job of having these conversations that need to be had and need to be said in books. Did it in such a way where to me, in my experience with this book, it didn't make me frustrated. It didn't make me upset in such a way where I was mad at the book. I think that it handled those conversations beautifully. I was very much able to connect with Clementine with how she was going through her aunt's death and those stages of grief. And I think that this author did an incredible job giving the aunt's story justice and explaining it and having our main character go through all of that grief. I think that it was beautifully done, and I, for one, loved it. I think that it was great conversations, and I think too, once we got a little bit further into the story and our love interest, we learned a little bit more about him and his life and his friends and his family. I really loved how all of that was done, and I think that all of these characters were very well liked, and I, for one, had a lot of fun with all of these characters. I think that the author did a great job of not only making our two main characters, the love interest and Clementine, very complicated and real and in-depth people, but our side characters, everybody to me just felt very well rounded, and I very much enjoyed all of this. And I think that the whole plot of this story too was beautiful. I loved that sometimes you can fall in love with somebody and it might be the right person but not the right time. I think that this was a beautiful, bittersweet story. If you had taken out that, you know, magical realism element that involved the apartment, I think that this happens quite often where, you know, we can come and find the right person and fall in love with the right person, but it might not necessarily be the right time. That whole timeline and how everything was, it was beautifully crafted. I had so much fun with this book. I think the pacing of this story was very well done. I didn't ever feel bored at any point in time. I love all parts of this story. I loved when we got pulled back in time to 7 years ago with our love interest in the apartment. I loved that exploration, and I really loved the bonding between these two characters. It felt very real, and it felt very much how certain situations would happen, if that makes any sense. Not saying with the magical realism part of this, with the apartment and everything, like that doesn't happen. So I think that the story was executed very well. I had so much freaking fun with it. This was my first Ashley Poston, and I will for sure be reading more by this author. I do have the Dead Romantics over there on that bookshelf, so I will read that. If it's as, I'm gonna say, heavy hitting, and that might not be the correct word, but there are some emotional things in here that, at least in this book, got to me with the certain topics. I won't necessarily explain because I don't want it to be a spoiler, and I definitely don't want to spoil this for anybody. If there are similar things that go on in here that go on in the other book, I'm a little nervous. So I think it'll be a moment before I can read another Ashley Poston. The name of the other book is The Dead Romantics, so I'm assuming there's some type of element that could be possibly similar to this one. But who knows? You know, it's a different book. It's the same author, a different book, and they're not companions or anything, I don't think. So that's really all I have to say about this one. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun filming this vlog. I think that I read a lot of romance and thrillers, or thrillers that had some romance, and I'm not a big romance reader. I will probably pick up more romance because I have been enjoying my romance era. I have been really just having a lot of fun with all of the books I've been picking up recently, especially the 4 that were in this vlog. That is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you've read any of these 4 books, or if I've put any new book on your radar. Definitely let me know all of that down in the comments below. But if you're still here and you don't know what else to say, leave me a little lemon emoji down below in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.